Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Furtado, Just Furtado, where we pass wisdom from generation to generation. And in today's episode, our guest is Mary Ingram, the founder of Volunteer Nebraska and former Diversion officer. This is a very in-depth, vulnerable conversation around the power of giving youth ownership over their voices, over leadership, community service, and so much more. So make sure you listen to the full episode because the best part is towards the end. And no, don't skip the middle. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Mary, and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you on today. I'm thrilled to have our conversation around service, and I feel like service and leadership are very intertwined, which leads us to the first question we always ask our guests is, what is your definition of impactful leadership, and how does it show up in your everyday life?
I think this is an outstanding question. For me, I try to make things as simple as I can so that it's easy to explain. And I would say that impactful leadership is when leadership can create change. And in order for you to have some direction in that, I have to identify a problem, something that needs to be fixed, changed, or improved. And when I can do that, then I need to find a solution. There needs to be a change in that. And how do I go about doing it? And I think that there's a process for that.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And I think segueing from there, I'd love to kind of touch on the three questions that you talk about with change that you talked about in your podcast, or not in your podcast, in your TED talk that you gave last year.
Those three questions could be used at any time. I use them in a juvenile justice atmosphere because community service to me is problem solving, and kids are assigned community
Right.
service. Right. And I totally
Yep.
get their perspective of this is no fun. We have to do this. But that is not what
Right.
community service is. It's such a privilege to get out there and have a voice in your community and make an impact. And I wanted them to see it from that perspective. So rather than me just assigning them a service project, I wanted them to go out into the community and look around. What do they see that needed to be fixed, changed, or improved? And when they identified that problem, whatever it was, I could ask them the three questions. Do you play a role? Can it be changed? And can you change it? If they said yes to those three questions, they had to do something. Whether it worked or not,
Right.
I didn't care. But you need to take some action on that problem. And it was really almost, I kind of chuckle at it, but the problem that the kids kept identifying is that there's nothing fun for them to do. A lot of the kids that were coming through my diversion program was based on alcohol use. They were partying on the weekends. And a lot of people would look at that and identify the problem as alcohol use. That wasn't the core problem. The problem was there's nothing as an alternative for kids to do. So that's the problem they identified. Right. And they took off with it.
Yeah, they took off with it. Then no, that's beautiful. And I think I almost want to kind of go back a little bit and touch on your point of like reframing the opportunity that you get to have to serve the community. Because I think, if you're working in the juvenile justice system, and I have a brief familiarity, like I talked about, I had the class, and that for those that are listening, I took a class at University of Oregon inside Oregon State Penitentiary, and it was on the juvenile justice system. And a lot of times with the juvenile justice system, you have to perform X amount of community service hours. Well, when you assign it like that, then it feels like work and it's something you have to do. You talk about the shifting of that have to do to get to do and what that kind of unlocks for someone to connect to their own community.
It is exactly what I saw, is that these kids did not want to do their service hours. It wasn't fun. I actually had an incident happen. It was on a Saturday morning. We were working at a kind of a community park area, and the kids were out there picking up
Hmm.
trash, and we were digging dandelions out of the lawn, and just cleaning up the area.
Right.
And a man and his little boy were passing by. They were just walking down the sidewalk, and I saw him tug at his little boy's arm, and he said, "You better
Mm.
be good, or you're going to be doing that." And he pointed in our direction.
Right.
And for me, it was like that
Yeah.
wow moment that this is not just the way these kids are seeing it. The general
Mm.
population can look at it that way as well. And also,
Right.
this man is teaching his son, who was probably 4 or 5, I would guess. Is that the way we want to teach our small children about community service? And it just, a light went on
Right.
for me. And I took off.
No, I love that. And so when you're taking off, right? Because I actually have an opposite experience where I went to a tiny school in Northern California, K through 12, or no, K through 8, 120 kids, and we had to do community service to graduate. And also, there's something about being in a small school, small community that when I was in 5th grade, we read to the first graders. When you're in 8th grade, you mentor and tutor the 5th graders. So there's this cycle of kind of giving back. So I kind of had a seed planted that community service is important. Of course, when you're a kid, maybe you don't want to do that. You kind of want to be selfish and have fun. But some of those ideas are planted in us at a really young age. So can you talk about some of the work that you are doing to kind of reframe and reshape how kids are thinking and seeing community service?
I think the example to share with you is probably one that happened with myself and my youngest daughter.
Hmm.
My daughter was 6 weeks old when we were invited to come into a nursing facility. And when you talk about a small community, we were living in a small town here in Nebraska, 1,100 people.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we're talking a
Yeah,
really
it's
small
small.
community. And she was invited to come into the nursing facility. Now, at first, I'm like, well, what are we going to have to do? She's 6 weeks old. And the volunteer
Right.
coordinator said, "We just want you to bring her in. The residents would love to hold her and love on her and cuddle her, and it'll just be a wonderful
Hmm.
hour." And she wanted me to do this once a month. And I thought, okay, I can do this. So I started bringing her in.
Right.
And they would hold her and pass her around, and they would tell me stories about how, a parenting experience for them. They would ask me, what is she learning? Does she like to play peekaboo? Is she walking yet? Can she
Yeah.
roll over? I mean, all of those questions. And as Emily grew, each time she would go, we would have more residents. So her circle of support grew in numbers. And she really
Hmm.
began to feel like these were grandparents. This kid had more grandparents than any child on the planet. But as Emily became a
Yeah.
toddler and could run around the halls a little bit and move, she started playing balloon volleyball with them. And they had her leading this
Okay.
exercise in their exercise class. And I started to step back and go, this isn't just benefiting these residents. My daughter is getting so much experience in leadership,
Hmm.
becoming more socially
Hmm.
outgoing, more confident in herself. She was gaining so much from this simple little interaction that she was having at this nursing home.
Yeah, there's so much to that because when I was doing some research, I read through your article about unmasking people or unmasking ourselves, right, and just being ourselves, being our authentic selves. And I've talked a little bit about that before because as a person who is a connector, sometimes I can wear my mask with the people that I'm connecting with, and so it's almost a little bit challenging to you know not necessarily be my authentic self, but I've put on masks as a younger person, like when I was in high school, when I was in college, and even kind of coming out of college. And so, with that, I found that I really found a lot of myself and who I am through service and through serving other people, which is almost what I hear you talking about with your own daughter. So, could you expand more on how, like, serving the community actually ends up helping yourself and finding and discovering who we are as individuals.
I think it's important to be authentic and who are you? And I think we're at
Yeah.
all times we're trying to define that. And sometimes it takes till
Mm-hmm.
you're my age to really feel
Yeah.
comfortable with who you are. I think
Right.
it is something that comes to mind for me is several years ago, I heard a gentleman by the name of Rafe Esquith. He was an educator, I think, out in California. And he was
Okay.
doing a presentation, and he's done some YouTube things, so you can find it there, on Lawrence Kohlberg's 6 levels of moral development. And
Okay.
it is kind of your why behind why you do anything. And I linked these 6 levels to community service because it really
Okay.
explained to me why some people do it and what is in it in them that make you choose to do
Mm.
service. And the very first level was to avoid punishment. And I was kind of thinking at the time, well, the kids who are in trouble aren't doing it to avoid punishment. It kind of is a punishment. But then I
Right.
thought,
Right.
no, they want to avoid going back to court and getting a harsher sentence. So they're going to do what I ask
Right.
of them. It is to avoid
Right.
punishment. The next level was self-interest. What's in it for me? And there might be some students, as you know, I'm dealing with mostly teens, but at that level, they might be doing it because they're going to be applying for college scholarships, and it looks great on that application. So they might be out there doing
Yeah.
service because it's something that they will benefit from.
Yeah.
Number 3
Right.
is praise. They might be doing it if you're a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, you're doing it because you're going to get a badge. You're going to get recognized for it.
Mm.
My nonprofit that I started a few years ago, that's what it's based on. It's recognition for kids preschool to high school who do service. So number 3 was praise. The fourth one is it's the rule. And so many schools today make it a requirement to graduate. It's a rule, and that's why kids are doing it. We want our kids to see this in levels 5 and 6. We want them to be at that level. Number 5, the easiest way for me to explain is it's you can serve others. You get to help someone, and that makes you feel good. So that's why you're going to do it. And the last one is it becomes your personal code of conduct. It's your choice. It's who you are. You see something that needs to be fixed, you're going to go take care of it. You see someone that needs help, you're going to do it because that's who you are. Now, I won't say that this has anything to do with age because I knew a little girl who she would go on walks with her mom, and there was lots of trash thrown around on the hike bike trail. It bothered her so much that her mom said, why don't you just bring a garbage bag along and do it? And she started picking up trash all along the bike trail, and she loved it. She even got a little irritated when the adults would keep throwing their trash out. She wanted, it bothered her that they were not being respectful of the environment. But that's who she is. So when you look at those 6 reasons or those 6 levels of moral development, where are you at? And you can do this for anything. Why do you go to work? Why do you make your bed in the morning? You can justify all of your actions using those 6 levels to really define who you are.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I want to stay on the service topic because number one, I love serving others. That's number 5. But then once you serve others and you do it consistently, I don't want to say the word constantly, but consistently, it becomes a part of who you are. So to me, like I recognize the value and service to others, and maybe it's not always community service because I get paid to coach basketball, but to me, like I'm coaching kids, like that is an act of service, even though I am being compensated for it, but it's part of who I am. I'm curious how you develop that in your nonprofit and develop that as a part and develop the desire to serve others as a part of who a lot of the people, especially in the juvenile system, are.
I agree that number 5 looks to be like that, but really it can be service at any level because
Hmm.
it might be the kids who have to do it that are doing it because they, don't want to go back to court. But how you
Right.
introduce it to them can open their eyes to see it at a much deeper level. Any one of these levels can be the introduction to helping them step toward that personal code of conduct where it becomes who they are.
Yes. Right.
So when kids come to me and they're doing it because it's a graduation requirement, my thought is, okay, great. You're taking responsibility and you're trying to get your ducks in a row to graduate. But what
Hmm.
problem do you want to fix? Make it personal to them.
Mm.
Make it something that they want to work on. It's not what project do I have available. I want to know what is it that you want to work on and why is that important? Because this goes in for me kind of a problem solving tool that I teach is when I can identify a problem that this is the goal, okay, this is what we want to
Right.
fix. We identify a solution and then I go, why is it important? And if they can tell me why it's important to them, I want it to be extremely important. It's not just, oh, I want to get this done. No, maybe you want to go
Right.
help a. Let's say we're going to help a food kitchen, a soup kitchen. Maybe
Okay.
you yourself went hungry for a while, or maybe you saw somebody
Mm.
eating out of a dumpster, and it really bothered you. Then, when you take action and you go to do something about it, and if it works, great. You evaluate it and say it worked. We can celebrate. That's kind of the pathway for it. But what happens if it didn't work? Then you have to look at that and go, why didn't it work? How can we change it? And we're going to try it again. Well, if that why is really important, you're going to make that, and you'll do that over and over and over again until you get it right. But if that why
Right.
is passive, it really doesn't matter. First time you fail, not a big deal. You're going to go on. If it's important to you, you will stay with that problem and you'll work through it until you
Mm.
get the results that you want. And that is with any kind of a problem.
Yeah, so to me, I kind of hear that it's about like guiding people to find that internal kind of why, but like really connecting it to it. So like for me, like why I work and I coach youth basketball is that's where I learned so much of my life lessons was through sports. I had a lot of great coaches. I had so many positive experiences that I want to give that back. And that's something that's important to me that I will show up and do that even on the days when I am tired and I don't feel like it. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're cultivating within. It's just it's a constant process of asking these three questions of what can I do, but number one, why do I want to do it in the first place, right?
I have to ask you, how you probably can name coaches that had an impact in your life. Would you
Right.
say yes? Right. Is that who you're striving
Yeah.
to
Oh,
be?
100%.
100%.
Yes.
And you
Most definitely.
most definitely. And when you have a student who comes back to you and goes, "Wow, thank you. You helped. You taught me something, or I finally made that home run, or whatever you're coaching in."
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Right.
can feel. You feel good. It makes you feel good
Hmm.
to be able to look
Yeah.
at that child and say, "I see growth in that child, and I'm really having that impact
Yeah.
that we want to have."
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, seeing the growth in kids is like why I do it. It's like amazing when you start working with them the first day and then, at the end of the season or the end of a school year, and you see that, little humans growth, it's amazing. And then especially with the connections that you build with them, the relationships you build with the parents and they like start to notice like that's kind of what really that's why I do it, right? And I think, you know, I want to pass that on to other people and get them passionate about what they're passionate about, so they can kind of do the same thing. And that's almost what I'm doing here with the podcast. Is I'm hoping that I can, you know, pass wisdom from generation to generation and inspire people to go and find that why that they want to continue giving back and making the world a better place.
I can really feel that in you, that this is important. And I
Right.
think this will only magnify as you get older and you start to see
Mm.
the young people that you've worked with. I have kids who, are now teachers and
Yeah,
coaches.
it's amazing.
I have parents, they're now parenting and they have their own children. It's just, there's just so much satisfaction. It just warms my
Right.
heart when I can see these
Yeah.
kids, and my nonprofit that I have, it's exciting because I have a couple of the kids who were kids,
Hmm.
20 years ago, who now serve on my board of directors, and they now are a
That's amazing.
part of my nonprofit. And it is, there's just so much satisfaction in being able to sit back and look out and see what those kids that are no longer kids are doing,
Right.
and to know you had a little play in that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not. I remember when I first began, like I was like, I thought it would be like a big percentage, you know, but there's so many other factors that are going on that if I can just be a little percent of an impact, like that's that's doing the best I can, right? Just do the best I can. My question to you actually is where did this journey for you come from, serving others and going along? Was it when you were in childhood and or as you kind of became an adult? How did this come to be?
I think, in my memory, if my memory is serving me, I think my first uh, thing that comes to mind is I was in the third grade, and my third grade teacher asked
Okay.
me if I could stay after school and help her clean out some of the art cupboards. I was little, I could get
Okay.
down inside and pull things out of me. It was just easier for me to do it than her. But I felt like, wow, I can help my teacher. And I love my teacher. She was an awesome
Right.
lady. The next
Yeah.
year, the principal asked me if I would serve on a youth advisory council. They were trying to look at some of the rules. They were having problems like with people bringing bikes, like they might only live a couple of blocks away, but they were riding their bike to school and the bike racks were
Okay.
overcrowded and, it's just a mess.
Okay.
And so he wanted to set some rules up, but he didn't really want to be the dictator of it. He didn't want to say, this is what is going to happen.
Right.
So he brought a group of kids together to say, what's a reasonable distance that you should live in order for kids to ride their bikes? And we came up with so many blocks away. And because the kids were the ones who had made the rule, everybody jumped in and said, yeah, we understand why you're doing it. And, you know, this is the way it's going to go. The bike rack area got cleared up. But that experience of giving us a voice to be able to work as a team,
Mm.
discuss issues about what are we considering, and seeing adults run with it and it worked, really, I think was a valuable lesson for me as a kid to say, wow, kids can
Right.
make a difference. And
Yeah.
giving that, starting the Merritt County Youth Council when I did as a diversion officer, I think can be linked back to when I served on that board as how I felt, giving these kids a voice. I mean, it all is connected. It's like one journey that just kind of takes you through it.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing how everything builds upon itself, and I love you for you to expand a little bit more because when we talked on the pre-pod call, we talked about youth leadership, and a lot of times, you know, I'm even probably guilty of saying it myself. We talk about impacting the next generation of leaders so they can lead tomorrow, but you're talking about how youth can lead today.
Absolutely. I don't know if kids are heard. I don't know if they feel heard. And I think that that is
Right.
important for us as adults to sit back and go, what do you see that needs to be fixed, changed, or improved? How would you go about it? Is there anything that I can do to help you do that? Because Kids,
Mm.
and I'm talking any age of kids. I'm not talking just teens or near, close adults. I'm saying any kid. I have seen kids, the little girl who was, I think maybe 4 or 5 at the time, who was going out and cleaning up the hike bike trail. It was something she identified.
Right.
She went out and did it. I have seen. We had a project that we worked on in Franklin, small community. We were renovating a movie theater, and I wanted to get kids involved in it. A lot of the adults were doing fundraisers, and we were doing the manual labor of cleanup and painting and doing all of that. But I wanted to get the
Right.
kids involved. Right. This should be a community project. Every individual could help. I went into the elementary school. I think the kids were 6th grade, and I said, "Let's do an auction. A silent auction, and we could
Right.
ask these famous people for things to donate, and then we'll auction them off. And you
Hmm.
guys can ask anybody you want." And they're like, "You mean we get to write a letter to, who else?" Yeah, we
Right.
got. Right. I think Jerry Rice donated a football jersey for us.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Debbie Gibson, who, that's probably dating me, but she had sent a cassette, a music cassette. We're talking cassette
Nice.
tapes. Nice. For
Right
her,
back in the day,
for
yeah.
her donation. We had a politician who used to be the governor, was now a United States senator. He donated a
Okay.
photograph of the Capitol building.
Nice.
So we were getting these contributions, and these kids were like, "Wow, my letter worked! I got this!" And they were really
Right.
pumped. Right. But this was a fun project that they got to, reach out, help build. It ended up not being a super successful money, income. It wasn't like we earned thousands of dollars with the donations. We didn't care. This was a fun activity that these kids brought together, and we did it as a community.
Yeah. Honestly, what I hear in that is focus on the long-term development of the impact that that experience had on the kids versus the short-term need to raise a bunch of money because the parents and the adults obviously have more fundraising experience and could have made more money, but essentially you're giving that power to the youth, the ownership that they were a part of this project and they have say in how the fundraiser is going to be run. So I think that's amazing. And a lot of the podcasts I end up having talking to other coaches talk about the power of giving ownership. And can you, almost, what are your thoughts on ownership when it comes to leadership?
It's a must for you to be able to own the project or the problem. Let's say the problem. If it doesn't have anything to do with me, I may not even care. But if I
Right.
can somehow connect to it, maybe it's a neighbor that's I see that is struggling, or uh, the kids in my community, or whatever it is. If I can say I play a role, and we go back to those 3 questions: do you have a role in it? Can it be changed? And can you change it? If you can say yes to those 3 questions, you have an obligation to do something about it. You might not be able to fix it. You might not really, it might not work. But did you open someone's eyes to that problem? Did you make it a little bit better? If that's the case, you did something that advanced it. And that's reason to
Right.
celebrate. Right.
Yeah, that is definitely a reason to celebrate. So, with those 3 questions and leading into kind of the tail end of our podcast, how can young leaders and young coaches who are working with youth now in utilize those 3 questions in their everyday work, either as coaches or youth development or teachers, people working with youth?
I think it can be, those 3 questions can be used in any issue. If you're working with a student and that student is uh, really struggling, maybe he's struggling with passing a class at school. Maybe he's
Hmm.
struggling with, getting along with his parents. I mean, it can be any problem. And you introduce those three questions. You start to focus on what is it that you that you are responsible for, and that kind of goes
Right.
into accountability. Um, the three things that I tell the kids that I was working with is that you're responsible for three things. You're responsible for your decisions, your actions, and your attitude. If something is happening out here, those three things are what you can have an impact on. And
Right.
it might be a decision to do something, it might be your reaction because of your attitude toward whatever it is. But when
Right.
you look at those three things, you are dealing with everything that you have control over. And what you do with it will determine whether or not you're successful in whatever you're facing, whatever problem you have in front of you. And so it isn't just about community service. It can be about anything.
Right. I think it's about kind of teaching kids that they have the power over those. I think sometimes they don't understand that they have their own ownership over making decisions, over actions and attitudes. And then it's almost probably having a discussion around, okay, what are the decisions that you're making? You probably don't have the decisions, or you probably don't have the decision power over your parents, right? You probably can't affect the actions of the weather, right? And you can't affect the attitudes of the people around you, but you can affect them. You can take control of them with yourself. So, with that being said, then kind of like building on it, okay, then what's next? How can you solve this problem? And giving back that ownership, giving back that power.
I have found, again, I'll go back to listening. When a child feels that he's being listened to, that somebody
Right.
is there tuned in, they tend to come to you. So if a child is
Right.
truly facing a serious issue, they will come to you and talk to you about it. And I think something that I had to learn, and I learned this from my oldest daughter, is my first response to her is, "This is what you should do." Blah 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 blah, and I can go
Mm.
through and give her my suggestion. I had to learn to be quiet and say, "I understand that you're frustrated in this situation. What do you think is the solution?"
Mm.
And she would give me what she thought she could do. If it's something that I think that's a pretty good idea, I don't
Right.
know if it'll work or not, I can say, go try it. See if
Right.
that works. Let them go out there and do it. You might know it's not going to work. She's going to find something out. But if there's
Right.
no danger, or anything, and it's just something she's going to learn from that process. She'll come back and say, "That didn't work, Mom."
Yeah.
Well, why didn't it work? What could we change? What happened? Tell me about it. And
Right.
that conversation happens, and that is all. You're teaching them first about trust and trusting somebody that you're working with. Uh, Also, gaining confidence in themselves because
Mm-hmm.
something didn't work. Well, I'm not giving up. I'm going to try something
Yep.
else.
Yep.
And that is just a life lesson that we implement every day for everything that we do. So
Yes.
many times people, it's kind of like wearing the mask. We think we have to do everything perfectly. We have to get it done right on the first try. And,
Right.
that's great if you can do it. But most of the time, I would say, no, that isn't the way it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read a book I remember a year ago that like kind of changed my perspective around working with youth. It was something around taming the advice monster and asking questions. And as adults, we always just want to tell the kids, you need to do this, you need to do that, right? Instead of giving them asking them questions and letting them kind of figure it out and make those mistakes, right? As long as it's not dangerous, it's not going to put them in harm's way. Like, I don't know, for me, I know that a lot of times I hear something and I'm like, I'll go figure it out on my own. then I'm like, and then I learned the lesson, right? It's more powerful to learn the lesson yourself and kind of go through that process. And you're right, it does build confidence, because if you do get it right, you build that confidence, like, oh, I made that decision, and then this happened and it worked. All right, I have this, right? I have this feeling. So I love that.
I would ask you, when you started your podcast, did you really know what you were doing?
No way. No, I didn't. And this is the second podcast that I'm on. And the first podcast, I really had no idea. And even though I did a podcast before, I kind of like, stopped for a year, and I still was kind of nervous about what in the world I was doing. And if the people that are listening that listen to the first few episodes, even of this Bridging Impact podcast, I was definitely nervous in the way. And now I'm more confident because I keep doing it. I keep going through my own progress. Like I could ask any other podcaster, what's it like? And I could just lean on them, but they can't tell me all the answers. I have to kind of, figure that out along the way for myself.
Absolutely. I think about when I started my nonprofit, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew what I wanted to accomplish with it. And it was
Right.
amazing how many people came into my life and said,
Mm,
you're going to need to do this. I can do that part for you. Attorneys,
yeah.
CPAs. I mean, people were coming in and saying, I used to be an IRS agent. I can do your,
Yeah.
file your for your 501c3. Really? Great, because I'm
Yeah.
trying, and I'm
Right.
not, and people came in and helped me do what I needed to do. And again,
Exactly.
as much as I feel like this is very personal, it's a project that's very personal, I could not have done it without the community
Hmm.
coming together to help me and support me in it.
Yeah, and I think that's another valuable lesson. Like, I love, this is my favorite quote of all time. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it is amazing once you start rallying around a project, like at first, like I had a harder time kind of, figuring out who's going to be a guest on my show, this and that. And now I'm at a point where I'm overflowing with guests. I'm reaching out to people like yourself that I meet, on Medium and Twitter. And then I have people that are in my life, like, in the physical world. So it's like kind of all happening. And I thought I was only going to do 12 episodes. Well, I'm like, I don't want to stop. I want to keep going. Like I get a lot of joy of having this conversation, with you in Nebraska, talking about caring, talking about service, talking about leadership, just by starting and asking myself questions and going on that own journey.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're doing this because
Thank you.
you're giving not only myself, but everyone that you interview a voice. And it's enabling us to connect with people
Yep.
all over who have similar either interests or need to hear this.
Yeah.
Maybe they're a kid who's struggling, going, you know what? I might have a voice in this, and go
Yeah.
out and do something. You will never know the impact that you are having.
I know. I think that is honestly one of the most interesting things, as someone that is probably has grown up in the kind of like social media era, and this is something that I've been challenged with, is like the impact is not the likes, comments, subscribes, or whatever it is, right? Like that's so measurable in our logical head, like is just like always judges ourselves on this. But I know that the impact that I have when I'm at a boys and girls club, when I'm coaching basketball, when I'm just working with youth is so much more impactful. And having these conversations where someone that listens to this probably won't like reach out to me because they might or yourself, right? They might not feel comfortable, but they're impacted by this conversation. And that's why I do it. And I'm sure that's why you do it as well.
Yeah, I'd go back to my third grade teacher. She probably had no idea that I would grow up to be an adult who that simple act of asking me to help her clean out the cupboard
Right.
has started.
The
it's
ripple
kind
effect.
of like the little ripple effect, and you have no idea what it can really amount to.
Yeah. So I would like, as we wrap up this conversation, I actually would like you to think about, for all the, your nonprofit, what is the vision that you have kind of for the world, the ripple effect that you're hoping to start, like your third grade teacher?
Make me cry. I think I want to see juvenile prisons close. If we can start with kids at a very, very young age, giving them a voice, empowering them to know how to handle problems, they won't make the decisions that put in there.
I couldn't agree more. I really don't think that we should be imprisoning kids. And I appreciate you and your vulnerability and just this overall conversation. And I think there's just so much power to giving people a voice, especially those that don't have a voice. You know, I'm here in LA and I have a privilege and opportunity to work in Watts. And I think oftentimes like we don't give some of the people that are underprivileged or are in the juvenile system a voice, and they're human too, and they just may not have been taught some of these skills. So I think it's an amazing work that you are doing.
Well, thank you so much for providing this platform for me, listening to me cry and rant.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And this is why I do it. This is why I do it. So with that, where can people find you, your work, your nonprofit, and any parting words?
I have a couple of websites. I have a personal website at maryingram.com, and the nonprofit is volunteernebraska.org.
Beautiful.
They can reach out to me.
Anytime. And I found Mary on Medium. She's also on Twitter, which is where we were connecting. So definitely give her a follow on Medium. Some great articles, especially for serving the community and serving kids. I appreciate your time today, Mary, and let's definitely stay in touch. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.